As revealed within the Essential Guide to Warfare, the emergence of the Republic's Grand Army was an astonishment to those within the galaxy, with such a military force never having been prepared before in such secrecy. However, while there clearly existed an explanation for the sudden emergence of the clone troopers who fought for the Republic during the Clone War, the Essential Guide to Warfare notes that this explanation wasn't understood until decades after the end of the Clone War, a result of the chaos created by the galactic conflict and the Republic's emphasis on secrecy. Not only that, but even then, the complete story wasn't established, something that demonstrates the immense machinations undertaken by the Sith in the decades prior to the Clone War. This lack of understanding was also present within the Jedi Order during the years of the Clone War itself, something that was crucial for the Sith as they carried out their grand plan for destroying the Republic and Jedi. However, there was one element that was known by the Jedi, even before the conflict began, that could have been an important component in connecting the clone troopers to the Sith, thereby potentially warning them that something like Order 66 could be possible in the future. This is the role of Jango Fett, an individual who the Jedi knew had knowledge of the clone troopers being trained upon Kamino, and as we'll see from the perspective of Yoda, was also aware of the plans of the Separatists in regards to building a significant army of their own. So it must be asked, did the Jedi ever question why Jango Fett assisted the Republic by helping to create the clone army on Kamino, but also fought with Dooku on Geonosis, appearing to, at least in some way, assist the Separatists? At the very least, did the Jedi develop some explanation for why and how Jango had knowledge of these important aspects well before they became aware of them, or consider what this might mean? This aspect was questioned by the Jedi in the aftermath of Geonosis, and in today's video, we'll look at the Legends novel Labyrinth of Evil to explain what the Jedi believed the importance of these events were, and why they didn't point them in the direction that suggested there were potential connections between the clone troopers and the Sith. As we mentioned previously, the emergence of the clone troopers of course came as a surprise to the Jedi Order. While a clearer understanding about the Clone Army and the Clone War wasn't known by the galaxy until decades afterwards, this lack of understanding found within the Jedi Order itself is demonstrated very well in Labyrinth of Evil. As seen within the novel, which takes place prior to the Battle of Coruscant depicted in Revenge of the Sith, even in the final days of the Clone War, the Jedi lacked an understanding of the most important elements of the conflict. This included whether Dooku answered to a Sith Master, or if he held that position within the Sith Order himself, the extent to which Dooku was telling the truth about Sidious being in control of the Senate, and importantly for our video here, how exactly the clone troopers were created. In a conversation between Yoda and Obi-Wan, Yoda had to admit that many of these issues were complicated by elements that they knew and by what they didn't know, with necessary assumptions only complicating matters even more. During this conversation, Obi-Wan directly asked Yoda whether Sifo-Dyas had ordered the clone army, with Yoda telling him that Sifo-Dyas was the individual who contacted the Kaminoans. However, Yoda revealed that he also received other important information from the Kaminoans. Yoda told Obi-Wan that Sifo-Dyas placed the order for the clone army, that Tyrannus was the individual who provided the donor clone, and that the army was intended to be used by the Republic. These answers only left Obi-Wan with more questions, such as what happened to Sifo-Dyas and whether Sifo-Dyas and Tyrannus could have been partners. In regards to this latter question, Yoda had to admit that this was another example of their ignorance, not knowing whether Sifo-Dyas and Tyrannus were partners in the creation of the clone army. However, despite the lack of information Yoda had regarding these topics, he didn't hesitate to point out that Jango Fett was clearly playing both sides in the conflict. Further, given his efforts on Kamino and his actions on Geonosis, Obi-Wan confidently pointed out that Jango had knowledge of both armies, the clone army of the Republic and the droid army of the Separatists, something Yoda didn't disagree with. In this way, Yoda understood the importance of Jango. But given this position of Jango, did Yoda and the Jedi High Council ever question that perhaps there was a potential link between Dooku and the Sith and the clone army being created on Kamino, with Jango being the individual creating this link? Labyrinth of Evil provides us with an answer to this question, and unsurprisingly, as revealed from the perspective of Yoda, although we recognize Jango's efforts in playing both sides, Yoda didn't see any connection to the Sith Grand Plan, or that there may potentially be something more nefarious about the clone army. Although Jango appeared to be utilizing both sides of the conflict, Yoda still believed there was a separation between what Jango was doing for the Republic on Kamino and what he was doing for Dooku and the Separatists. Yoda was adamant in his explanation to Obi-Wan. Jango wasn't contacted by Dooku or the Sith or anyone connected to the Separatists to be the clone template for the clone army, but by someone on the side of the Republic. Even more, Jango was acting only as an intermediary regarding his efforts that were assisting the Separatists, helping Dooku and fighting against the Jedi on Geonosis only because he was hired to do so. In this way, Yoda believed there was no question Jango was playing both sides, but there was a clear delineation between what Jango was doing on Kamino and what he was doing in regards to helping Dooku, with no connections being made to some larger plan that would benefit the Sith and work to the detriment of the Jedi. Due to the complete lack of information regarding this topic, Yoda and the Jedi couldn't confidently make a conclusion that went further than that. Although Jango was of course part of a larger plan involving the Sith Grand Plan orchestrated by Sidious and Dooku, Jango's actions involving Kamino on one side and Dooku on the other continued to be viewed by the Jedi as separate and unrelated, with the clone army always having been created for the Republic, as it was believed that Jango worked with someone on the side of the Republic to ensure its creation. I'll note quickly at the end here that it wasn't easy to simply connect Jango to the Separatists through his actions that occurred on Geonosis in Attack of the Clones, and thereby potentially also see a connection between Jango, Dooku and the Sith, and the clone army. It wasn't just the Jedi who believed that Jango was merely helping Dooku on Geonosis because he was hired to do so, and therefore didn't have any significant allegiances to Dooku and the Separatists. As seen within the Legends novel The Cestus Deception, following the Battle of Geonosis, an ARC trooper named Nate still considered Jango the galaxy's greatest bounty hunter, a great warrior, and someone who was honorable, despite the fact that Nate fully recognized that Jango had fought beside Dooku and the Separatists during the battle. This was because, just as Yoda explained to Obi-Wan, Nate believed that Jango was present at the battle simply because he accepted a contract with Dooku, and having been hired by Dooku, Jango had no other choice but to assist the Separatists, having given his word to do so. Because of this, Nate didn't consider Jango's actions as indicating something more nefarious regarding a potential connection between Jango and Dooku, but was another reason why the ARC trooper respected Jango even more. Therefore, Jango Fett's participation in the creation and training of the clone army on Kamino, and his fighting beside Dooku on Geonosis, something that clearly meant that he had knowledge of both of the armies that would go on to fight the Clone War, did cause the Jedi to question the importance of Jango, and if this was an indication of something more significant. However, as Yoda revealed in Labyrinth of Evil, while Jango was playing both sides of the conflict, the Jedi concluded that Jango was only helping Dooku because he was hired to do so, and the Jedi still believed that Jango was contacted by someone within the Republic to create the clone army, with the clone troopers always being intended to fight on the side of the Republic. In this way, the Jedi didn't see Jango and his actions as something that could indicate a possible connection between the Sith and the clone troopers. So there we have it, how the Jedi questioned why Jango Fett helped create the clone army on Kamino, but also fought with Dooku on Geonosis. We love making these videos, so why not subscribe for more fun Star Wars theories and discussions. Also, if you enjoyed the video, think about giving a like or leaving a comment. If not for me, for Tyrannus.